I am so convinced about the validity of my findings. It's not about Jacques Gauthier, it's about the issue of the legal title to Jerusalem. You know, one of the things I have to deal with often is this question, but Dr. Gauthier, why are you telling us about legal findings? Don't you understand that this is a political matter? Have you not grasped the realities? And we have some difficulty presenting counter arguments when we look at your heavy thing, but who cares? This is about politics. My response to that is, wait a minute. The Secretary General of the United Nations and many of the member nations constantly declare that Jewish people in at least parts of Jerusalem are there illegally, they're trespassers, they're wrongdoers, they're thieves. And as one who's practiced law over 39 years, I should say to you that has a legal implication. If they have no rights, then perhaps they're trespassers, perhaps they're thieves, but if in fact, at some point in time in history, the rights have been given to them, then perhaps they're there as of right and they're not thieves. And the word settlement should not be used in such a negative connotation in respect to those who live in part of Jerusalem. When I started my work, I must tell you, I had no idea that it would take this long. I wasn't planning to work on this for over 20 years. What happened to me along the way, because this was a doctoral thesis at the University of Geneva Graduate Institute of International Studies. I had as an initial director a marvelous, very, very highly regarded professor of international law, Lucius Kaflisch, who was then appointed to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and said, someone else must take over the ongoing supervision of your work, and he introduced me to Marcelo Cohen, with a K. Originally from Argentina, speaks and writes in 5 languages. His thesis, a marvelous academic work on issues of sovereignty, not specifically relating to the Middle East, but won the Guggenheim Prize. And Professor Cohen, when he first met me, said, you know, a lot of people have sentiments, opinions, and views relating to the issue of Jerusalem, and I don't care about those. If you are prepared to work with me as a scientist, if you are prepared to approach this in a scholarly way, and never give me a draft chapter without supporting every single page with solid evidence that what you're saying is well-founded, then we won't work together. We did work together, and because of him, it took much longer. And because of him, there are now 3,200 footnotes in here. Without him, and a friendly supervisor, it might have been like this. You know, I look at the thesis of Theodor Herzl. He got a doctorate for his work. It's only about 80 pages. It's not fair. Look what I had to do for mine. And so today I look back, and it was grueling, it was demanding, it was challenging, but I'm thankful because I had to go into every nook and cranny of the history, try to understand the foundations of the Muslim claims, of the Christian claims, and of course of the Jewish claims. If you try to summarize the connection between the Jewish people and the city of Jerusalem, it's not easy. Try to do it in less than 5,000 pages. It's very hard. I had to do it in less than 200 pages. Otherwise, this would not be a legal thesis. So I had to learn to do executive summaries. Present, for instance, the connection between Jerusalem and the Jewish people biblically from the book of Psalms in 1 page. Try it. It takes a long time to do executive summaries. The foundations are here. What I'm interested in is the answer to the question, has in a moment of history, is there a situation that took place where title was given under international law to one party or another? Is it possible as a jurist, as an international lawyer, to make the statement that the issue of sovereignty has already been dealt with and decided? My conclusion is that it is chose jugée. It is res judicata. The decisions have been made. There was a moment in history when presentations were made. Documents, in Canada we would call them a statement of claim. When you go to court, you present a statement of what you want to the judge or judges. Your statement of claim is not a source of obligations and rights, but the decision made by the judge or judges when they hear your case is indeed binding. Did that happen? So the pursuit of the answer was like putting together a 10,000-piece puzzle. For those of you who do puzzles, it takes a long time when you got so many pieces for an image to appear. You know, you got little things here and there, but the image doesn't come out until you put the key pieces of the puzzle together. The truth is, I didn't know the answer when I commenced my work. I did not set out to establish that the Jewish people or the Palestinians had title. I didn't know if such an event had taken place. The approach that I want to take is this. And this is what I do as I speak about this issue in various parliaments around the world. And I've been told repeatedly that in places, whether it's the parliament in Brussels or Columbia University in New York, just for the next slide. Okay, thank you. That I might encounter some hostility, I might face some real opposition, but the truth is, what I want to do with you, whoever you are, is talk to you about a matter that involves justice. I'm appealing to people of conscience. I want you to listen to the facts. Because when you pass judgment, if you've got half the facts, or you have the wrong facts, then it's likely that your decision is not going to be the right one. So come with me. Allow me to present to you the pertinent facts relating to the issue of sovereignty over Jerusalem, and more specifically, the old city of Jerusalem. What's fascinating is when I present the initial part of my findings, I talk about the Green Line and how it's become so relevant in whatever is declared around the world. And my hope is that I can convey to those who are listening to me what the meaning of the Green Line is. It's considered sacred. It's considered the real dividing source of rights and obligations between the Jewish state and perhaps a future Palestinian state. If you look at many documents and maps, you will see that the Green Line is associated with Jordan, and here the blue line is associated with Israel. Please work. You see the green line around the old city here. And what I point out is this. The Green Line is nothing but the armistice line resulting from the agreement between Jordan and Israel in 1949. In international law, there's a book that deals with the law of war, and there's a book that deals with issues of sovereignty. In respect to the law of war, the desire of those who are preoccupied with these issues is to encourage those who are killing each other and fighting to stop fighting. And that's why you have an armistice agreement, and in that agreement certain lines are drawn, and you're told if you agree to stop fighting and the lines are thus and thus, do not be concerned about the implications from the point of view of entitlement to sovereignty political claims. Look at Article 2. It specifies that in no way should this line prejudice the rights, claims, and positions of the parties. So when I explain this, and note that in so many contexts, in so many documents and resolutions of the United Nations, the Green Line is used in respect to the proposed partition of Jerusalem, I explain that, you see, what would in fact happen if you did that is that the dark green would be the Palestinian capital, the remnant of Jerusalem, and the dark blue would be the Israeli Jerusalem, and the light green is the Palestinian state surrounding what's left of Jewish Jerusalem. And then I talk about the old city. What is so misunderstood is the significance of the old city. You live here. You assume that everybody understands that when you're referring to the old city, you're referring to the walled city. What I find is a reference to the old city is interpreted to mean all of Jerusalem, which is an old place. It's not often understood that it is the walled city. So the old city. So when I explain that by using the green line, the entirety of the old city of Jerusalem would be part of the Palestinian capital, they're surprised. The claims you're familiar with. Israel is taking the position that it should retain sovereignty over the entirety of Jerusalem. The Palestinian position, at least officially, is that all of so-called Arab East Jerusalem should be part of, or should become their capital. If you're speaking for Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, many others, all of Jerusalem, in fact, the entirety of Western Palestine should, as it was in the documents that I'm going to present to you, should be under sovereignty of the Palestinians. Why my focus on the old city? In 2 minutes. If you look at the old city, it resembles, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close to the way Jerusalem was before it was destroyed in the 1st century. In fact, if you look at the Roman city built around 135 AD, again, there are a lot of similarities between what you see here and the walled city of Jerusalem today. In fact, here's I collect maps and lithographs, and here's a depiction of Jerusalem in the 12th century. Here's a middle of the 19th century lithograph, and I've got a bunch of those. Jerusalem is the old city. Here's a French map, 19th century. There's nothing outside the walls. Here's a picture of Jerusalem in the early 20th century, about 1930. What's my point? In the minds of those who have written books and articles, who have presented arguments here, there, and everywhere, the Jerusalem that matters, the one that was there for almost 20 centuries, is the old city. So when we talk about dividing Jerusalem, that's the reality. And when you start your argument by saying that all divisions must be pursuant to the Green Line, the ramifications are very significant. I will start my analysis of legal title with Herzl. I mention him because what he did was significant, was extremely significant. His thesis is a cornerstone in many ways, but remember, this is the beginning of my legal analysis. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because it's talking about a Jewish state. When so many questions are raised later about what it is that the Zionist organization was really trying to establish, let's begin with this. Incidentally, what made him so special was what he did a year later in Basel, Switzerland. Talk about miracles. He managed to unite 197 Jewish people in one place. One of the great challenges facing those who are fighting for the status of Jerusalem is the extent to which there's a lack of understanding of the rights that I'm going to describe to you in a few minutes, and the extent to which there's disunity among the Jewish people. At a time when there's such a consensus internationally, at a time when the nations are singing the same song more and more, and the marketing machinery of the Palestinians has never worked any better. It's frightening to see the extent to which there isn't much unity within Israel, around the world, in the Jewish communities. My hope is that there can be unity, at least in respect to what I'm presenting. I believe that there is so much legitimacy, there's so much soundness to the roots of title, that at the very least, and I realize that it's very difficult to extricate law from politics. In fact, when I read articles and books, and have I ever read a lot of those, relating to this issue, the blurring between politics and law is constant. So what we need to do is just extricate this. All I want you to do today is think about the legal dimension, and if you believe that the arguments are sound, then we can all agree in that regard. The thesis. He's presenting, if you look at the subtitle, a modern solution to the Jewish question. I thought his arguments are well put together, but not as impressive as what I found in Rome and Jerusalem by Moses Hess. What a wonderful presentation of that solution. Here's words from Moses Hess. What we have to do at present for the generation of the Jewish nation is first to keep alive the hope of the political rebirth of our people, and next to reawaken the hope where it slumbers, when political conditions in the Orient shape themselves as to permit the organization of a beginning of the restoration of a Jewish state. I could go on. He is so articulate. He explains so well the reason why that's a good solution. I also like Auto-Emancipation Pinsker, who I won't quote from him because of time limitations, but he says it so well. They weren't the only ones proposing solutions to the Jewish problem. There were many solutions put forward. Lev Davidovich Bernstein had a solution. The solution for the Jewish people and their problems is for them to lose their identity. Oh, by the way, his other name is Leon Trotsky. Perfect assimilation, as far as he was concerned, was the solution. Let's erase any trace of Jewishness from people around the world, and then we won't have any problems anymore. He tried very hard, but they still found out that he was Jewish. He ended up being assassinated. You know the story. So, here's a solution. The difference between him and Hess and Pinsker is what he did in Basel. He put together a gathering of leaders from different parts of the world, principally Europe, and came out with a program. In that program, it was clear that the aim was to establish a safe place, a home for the Jewish people in Palestine. That's noted there. That was the beginning of the movement. It takes us to London. It takes us to the Balfour Declaration. Of course, Herzl died. The heavy work was picked up by Weizmann and others. Chaim Weizmann, for me, is properly referred to in many of the articles I read as the father of modern Israel. He did so much. Very, very gifted man, scientist, diplomat. He had a combination of gifts which made a huge difference. His relationship with Balfour, with Lloyd George, with many key players in London did play a role in the Balfour Declaration being issued. The Balfour Declaration, incidentally, was not a declaration of a man. It was the British War Cabinet that made that declaration. What is fascinating when I read about the legal aspects of this issue is how often it is referred to as a source of rights and obligations for the Jewish people. It's not. It is the declaration of one state that did not even possess the territory in 1917. They were fighting the Turks. They were fighting the Turks and did not have legally the power of disposition, the authority to give to anyone. I cannot give your house, Adam, apartment, car, to somebody else because I don't own it. They did not have title. So at what point in time did a body of judicial officials or leaders have that authority? The turning point, as far as the legal question, is the Paris Peace Conference. For 6 months, the victorious Allies met at the Quai d'Orsay in Paris. The Quai d'Orsay is the Foreign Affairs Center for the French government. That's the way it was in many, many years ago. That's the way it is today. I took the picture. It hasn't changed much. The Arabs presented their claim in Paris in February of 1919, and so did the Zionist organization. To understand my legal arguments, we have to go back to the significance of what happened there. 5 nations referred to as the principal Allied powers, and the leaders referred to as the Supreme Council of the principal Allied powers, sat at a gigantic U-shaped table and deliberated after hearing submissions on the future status of the territories of the nations that lost the war. Okay. The Supreme Council, 5 nations, the United States, the UK, Japan, France, and Italy. Why are these 5 nations so significant? You see 4 leaders here because Japan was often excluded from the proceedings, but the key individuals at the time were Lloyd George, Orlando of Italy, Clemenceau of France, and Wilson of the United States. When the Arab delegation led by Faisal made its presentation in Paris, asking for territorial independence in respect of a large segment of the former Ottoman territories, it was presented to these leaders. When the Zionist organization, again in February of 1919, presented its claim, it was in the same place. When we talk about the Jewish claim and presentation, I've attached to my thesis an incredibly good article by Harry Sasher, who was an advisor to Weizmann, who gives the blueprint, in this day and age we call it roadmap, of what the Jewish people wanted. Please remember that in 1920 there were only about 80,000 Jewish people living in Palestine, compared to maybe 700,000 or 800,000 Arabs. The aim was not to establish a Jewish state right away. The strategy was this: let us appoint a friendly, respected nation as trustee or mandatory to help us while we, through the process of immigration, attain a majority in that land, and then we'll declare independence. That was the game plan. It would have been foolish, although some of the Jewish leaders were advocating immediate statehood. It would have been a foolish thing to do it earlier. Weizmann was the leader of the delegation in Paris, and I want you to note the essential terms of the claim that was presented. 2 things. In the claim, remember I referred to a statement of claim, there's a request for recognition, a request for acceptance from those who have the power of disposition of the historical connection of the Jewish people to the land, to Palestine. A request for this. It's fascinating for me how to see how often in this day and age I still see different groupings asking for this recognition when that's what happened in Paris. The question is, was it given? Was the answer yes? Was there a positive response? Then look at this, really crucial. When the Balfour Declaration was drafted, there were many attempts to